Legends of Urza Planeswalker tell of a companion in his millennia-long struggle to destroy Phyrexia, a creature of his own design born of artifice, constructed entirely of silver, and bestowed with the power to pierce the veil of space and time. A being that fought relentlessly to save Dominaria not just from Phyrexian invasion, but also from the unraveling of the time stream. One who in his long life has both gained and lost the abilities granted by the Planeswalker Spark, and one who to this day seeks to destroy a new Phyrexia on the rise. Karn, the Silver Golem. Hey lore lovers, my name's Eric and welcome to the Lorebrarians YouTube channel, where we share the lore and stories behind many fantasy settings to strengthen the connection between people and their passions. I hope everyone had a great holiday season, a happy new year, and safely made it to where their travels took them. I spent some time away from the channel to relax with family, but now we're back and I'm so excited to share the content we have planned for 2022. Alright, a few weeks ago I put up a poll asking which character you'd like to see covered in our Magic Stories series, with the majority of votes going to Karn. So today we'll be taking a closer look at the legendary golem, discussing his character and abilities before tracing his story from creation to the current day. But before we begin, I want to give a huge thanks to all of my supporters over on Patreon. Their patronage means the world to me and helps the channel grow and improve. And if you're interested in joining the Lore Luminaries, check us out on patreon.com/Lorebrarians. To gain access to me, get video drops a day early, other cool perks, and to join a growing community that shares your passion for lore. The support is much appreciated. Alright, time to steel our hearts against Phyrexia and unfurl the scrolls of Urza Planeswalker as we seek to uncover the story of Karn. Let's dive in. Karn is first and foremost an artifact, a golem made entirely of silver and designed by Urza Planeswalker and the Master Wizard Baron on Tolaria to travel back in time with the sole purpose of preventing the rise of Phyrexia. Though the time experiments fail, Karn plays an integral role in the war against Phyrexia, as he is part of the Legacy, a collection of beings and objects assembled by Urza and used to destroy Yawgmoth, the ruler of Phyrexia. Besides being constructed to fight the plague, Karn also possesses an innate ability to instantly understand artifacts and instill life within them by a mere touch. This is highlighted in the card Karn's Touch, in which he transforms an artifact into a creature, powers mirrored in the abilities of Karn Silver Golem and Karn the Great Creator. But Karn is so much more than a construct. In his 1,000 years of existence, he has gained, lost, and reignited a Planeswalker Spark, granting him powers that surpass many others and the ability to travel the blind eternities between planes. Until the creation of Calyx by the god Klothys on Theros, Karn was the only known artificially created Planeswalker. As an artifact, Karn is centered in colorless mana, but either due to his long years of study or his connection to Urza through the latter's spark, the golem is able to channel all 5 colors of mana. This gives Karn mastery over a vast arsenal of spells that can at the same moment destroy foes and protect allies. It also grants him a deeper understanding of and connection to the surrounding landscape and mana that flows throughout. Karn's cold genius is tempered by the deep emotions emanating from Tzaentch's Heartstone within his metal frame, a Phyrexian power conduit meant to give the Silver Golem self-awareness, a conscience, and what many would consider a soul. The Heartstone curses Karn with complex feelings and a sense of morality, the depths of which are seen in the flavortext of cards like Fade Away and Fireslinger, where the Silver Golem relates tales and fables full of hidden truths. As time beats on, Karn's emotional core endures hardship, loss, and failure, each exacerbated by the recollections of those before it. As the centuries pass, Karn's Heartstone is filled to the brim with anguish and pain, leaving him desperate to still the memories of his hardships. At one point, Karn caps his memory at 20 years, and at another, takes up a vow of pacifism. The brainchild of Dominaria's defender, with the Heartstone of a Phyrexian sleeper agent and a Planeswalker Spark housed within, Karn is an amalgamation of all that has come before him, a unique blend of Phyrexia and Dominaria. Karn has seen the darkest horrors and the brightest promises. His is a story deeply tied to that of Urza, a story that begins on the small island of Tolaria, roughly 1,200 years ago. In 3307 AR, Urza Planeswalker and his close ally Baron had already built a growing academy for the best and brightest artificers of Dominaria on the remote Tolarian Isle. Here, the students and instructors relentlessly labor over projects, designs, and experiments drawn up by Urza to save their plan against the coming Phyrexian invasion. One such experiment was a temporal manipulator intended to allow time travel, so that Urza may destroy the Phyrexia of the past to prevent Dominaria's future ruin. He made several probes meant to travel into the past, but after dozens of failed tests using the most durable metals available, Urza nearly abandoned the project. It seemed nothing inorganic or otherwise could withstand the terrible surges of energy caused by the device. But then, he came across a discovery related to us in the flavor text of Stroke of Genius, which reads, "After 100 failed experiments, Urza was stunned to find that common silver passed through the portal undamaged. He immediately designed a golem made of the metal. Thus, the idea of Karn was born, and in the background of the art, we can see schematic drawings of the golem. Though he made a breakthrough, Urza wished to give consciousness and awareness to his creation, an ability to respond and adapt to the environment, an ability to evolve. In essence, he desired an artifact that could think on its own. After many trials, Urza placed within the golem a power cortex and artificial matrix, a heartstone, that belonged to his old companion, the Phyrexian sleeper agent Zancha. The probe awoke, and Urza immediately began experimenting with a temporal manipulator. In the downtime between tests, Urza and Baron sent the probe out to mingle with students of the academy and learn of the world it had been born into. A young Teferi bullied the golem incessantly, giving it the name Artie Shovelhead and pulling several pranks on the silver golem. Talaria's brightest pupil, Joyra, intervened and taught the golem friendship. Together, they decided to give him the name Karn, an old Thran word that meant mighty. Joyra and Karn spent much of the following days in each other's company when the golem wasn't traveling through time for Urza, and the two developed a strong bond. But Karn's idol wouldn't last long. A castaway washed up ashore on Talaria, a man named Carrick, whom Joyra became infatuated with and secretly took in. The two started a tryst that ended in bloodshed and the destruction of the academy, for Carrick was a sleeper agent of Phyrexia. One night, while Talaria slept, Carrick brought in dozens of Phyrexian negators through passageways Joyra had shown him and let them loose on the academy. In the ensuing bedlam, Karn rushed to Joyra's quarters, the only friend he had, and found her in a pool of her own blood, killed by a negator. Karn sought out Urza, who revealed the Phyrexians had killed Baron as well, too steep of a price for the planeswalker to pay. Urza charged the golem with traveling back in time to thwart Carrick's infiltration. Although successful, Karn had traveled too far in time, and the stress placed on the temporal manipulator exceeded its durability. Urza pulled the golem back into the current day, the manipulator collapsed, and an instant later, an explosion of mana and temporal energies rent Talaria apart. The destruction was as complete as the Phyrexian attack had been. Most of the students and teachers were consumed in the blast, and many that had remained were killed or trapped in pockets of time stream anomalies that dotted the island. The extent of the damage can be seen in the art of the card Sunder and Karn's Temporal Sundering. With the time experiments halted and Talaria in shattered ruin, Karn was cast aside as Urza pursued new avenues of confronting Phyrexia. For years the golem toiled as nothing more than a laborer, until Urza discovered the Thran Manoreg in the volcanic mountains of Shiv. The ancient structure acted as a foundry for power stones, as well as the nearly indestructible Thran metal, tools that would allow Urza to fight back against his enemy. But the Manoreg was controlled by the Viashino in their bay. The planeswalker struck a deal in which he would trade Karn for access to the Manoreg's secrets. Cast out by the father that created him, Karn spent more years alongside Joyra, Teferi, and the Viashino as they built Urza's Power Stone batteries. It wasn't until 3360 AR that Karn, a golem meant for time travel, finally found new purpose with the creation of the skyship Weatherlight. The Weatherlight was designed by Urza to be the greatest weapon against Phyrexia, a craft built of Thran metal and living wood from Yavimaya that would continually evolve and that would eventually be imbued with its own sentience, much like Karn. When the golem installed the massive Power Stone engine that would fuel Weatherlight, Joyra was struck with a vision of a grander scale, She saw how deeply Karn and the skyship were connected. Two pieces of a greater legacy, Urza's legacy. Karn assumed the role of chief engineer on Weatherlight's maiden voyage to save refugees of Serra's realm before its imminent collapse at the hands of Phyrexia. The Golem was able to speak directly with the ship and deftly performed his duties next to Captain Joyra. They saved hundreds of Serrans from the twisted Archangel Radiant and the Phyrexians. Urza was nearly slain in his battle against Radiant when she ripped his Power Stone eyes from his body, and a realization dawned on him. The Planeswalker's body and powers are mighty, but he is nothing without those stones. They are his very soul, not unlike Karn and his Heartstone Matrix. After Weatherlight escaped the collapsed plane, Urza understood how much his creation meant to him, how important Karn was and would be in the coming years. He bought the Golem his freedom from the Viashino, and once more welcomed Karn as his child. Although Phyrexia was momentarily stayed, Urza began work on crafting the pieces of the legacy, and Karn was entrusted with protecting its human component. The Planeswalker initiated a massive bloodline project that would lead to the birth of the legacy's heir, a person meant to wield the collected legacy artifacts, a weapon to destroy Yawgmoth and Phyrexia. Karn's mission kept him from Joyra and Teferi, and over the years the Golem fell into an all-consuming depression. To save him from anguish, Baron and Urza placed a memory cap within Karn that would only allow him to remember the last 20 years. As his once perfect recall began slipping and his memories faded like any other being, Karn collected items that had meaning to his life and repeated a mantra every night in remembrance of his closest companion. Joyra is my friend, my best friend. Karn saw to his duties well in the centuries that followed, and the Bloodline project neared completion. Clan Capuchin of Benalia was introduced, and from them the heir to the legacy was born, Gerard Capuchin, in 4179 AR. Shortly after the boy was born, his life was endangered by Phyrexian attacks. Karn saved young Gerard and took him to Zadar Kondo of Jamura to be raised alongside the Kondo's own son. Years later, Zadar's son failed a rite of passage, and although Gerard saved his life, the young man was exiled from the clan. He resented Capuchin for the disgrace of not allowing him to die, so attacked and stole away with pieces of the legacy. Karn attempted to retrieve the artifacts, but during the mission he was tricked into killing an innocent life. For a creature as thoughtful and feeling as Karn, the shock of killing another consumed him. This allowed Zadar's son time to freeze the Golem with a touchstone artifact. From the flavor text of the card we can read how the event unfolded. One touch of the stone, and the Zadar's son turned me from stalwart to statue. Sisay, the new captain of Weatherlight, eventually found the deactivated Golem and brought Karn aboard the skyship for safekeeping until it could be restored. In roughly 4204 AR, Karn was found in the hull of Weatherlight by Gerard and reactivated. The horror of the murder he carried out years ago was still fresh in the newly awakened Golem's mind, and Karn swore a vow of pacifism to do no harm to another creature. Zadar's son, who had now become Volrath, the evincer of wrath, sought revenge against Gerard and so kidnapped Sisay and brought her to Wrath. Gerard, Karn, and the Weatherlight crew traveled to save her, but fell into Volrath's trap. He lured them to Wrath so he could destroy his brother and the legacy. Karn is attacked by Grevin and a contingent of Wrathy forces. In the art and flavor text of the card Pacifism, we see that the Golem remembers his vow and is helpless to resist. It shows Karn facing capture by dozens of Mog warriors and reads, "Frozen by conscience, Karn did not resist as the Mogs carried him to the Predator." Although Gerard evaded capture, much of the Weatherlight's crew was taken to Volrath's stronghold. The Golem was imprisoned and tortured by a rather ingenious device that played off his devotion to protect life. Karn was placed in a room that incessantly tumbled and supplied with an endless stream of Mogs that the pacifist Karn crushed and killed with his body weight. The extent of Karn's hopelessness is given to us in the flavor text of Propaganda, which shows the Golem in Volrath's prison. It reads, "You failed Gerard. You failed the legacy. You failed yourself. I can do no more." Karn's torment wouldn't last. In short order, Gerard returned to break Karn and the rest of the Weatherlight crew free, but before they left Wrath, the Golem sought to collect the confiscated legacy artifacts, placed under the guardianship of the dangerous hive species known as Slivers. Karn journeyed into the Sliver's lair and gained audience with the Sliver Queen. He beseeched her to release the legacy to him. The artifacts were a part of him just as the Sliver brood was a part of her. Karn's words convinced the Queen, and the legacy was once more restored, depicted in the art of the card Change of Heart. 1 year later, the conflict Urza had prepared for centuries comes to fruition. Karn and the legacy's purpose are called forth, and the collective breath of billions is held in 4205 AR when the Phyrexia invasion of Dominaria begins. The early stages of the invasion see the Phyrexian general Tsabo Tavok lead a siege on Koilos located near the gate to Phyrexia. Karn and the Weatherlight crew confront Tavok, but she proves to be a formidable foe. In their fight, she enslaves Gerard's mind and plans to take him to Yawgmoth. Caught between his oath of non-violence and his duty to his friends, Karn's decision is made when a blow to his head knocks free the memory cap placed by Urza and Baron. At once, the memories of countless friends and companions dying from the predations of Phyrexia come rushing back, and Karn realizes life cannot be preserved without death. He rips Tavok's legs apart and releases Gerard from the spell. The crew defeat the Phyrexian and save Koilos, but this was merely the first step of invasion. In the chaos and carnage that envelops the plane, 5 primeval dragons of awesome power are reborn, forces of destruction second only to the elder dragons of the plane. The planeswalker Tevish Zat manipulates Darigaz into awakening his slumbering siblings, and Croesus, the Dragon of Death, destroys Skyship Weatherlight before the legacy can be used against Phyrexia. Karn realizes the terrible threat the primevals pose, and so entreats Darigaz to relent, convincing the dragon to break the connection between the siblings by plummeting into an active volcano and sacrificing his own life. In an effort to restore the legacy, and with his memory cap removed, Karn delves into secrets kept within the Thran Tome, an artifact of the legacy that contained all the knowledge of the ancient civilization and that was used by Urza to construct many of his designs. Due to his connection to the legacy, Karn digests all of the information presented within the tome, understanding more than even Urza, and he uses this knowledge to begin Weatherlight's rebirth and final transformation. This final evolution confers sentience onto the skyship, and Karn feels connected with Weatherlight's intelligence, feels there is another artifact like him in the world. His joy wouldn't last long, as Yawgmoth himself emerged on Dominaria in the form of a giant death cloud, instantly killing millions and threatening the lives of billions on the plane. The Weatherlight sacrificed itself one final time in the skies above Urborg to slow the gods' advance. With time running thin and the hope of salvation slim, Gerard, Urza, and Karn gather the legacy artifacts and finally activate the weapon. Capuchin places Urza's Power Stone eyes within Karn, uniting the legacy and unleashing a magical torrent of pure white mana that burns Yawgmoth to his core, destroying him and the entirety of Phyrexia. The legacy's activation kills both Gerard and Urza, and the integration of Urza's Power Stone eyes transfer the Planeswalker Spark to Karn, who instantly ascends in the aftermath of the blast. With Phyrexia defeated and his purpose fulfilled, Karn finds new meaning and new opportunities across the Blind Eternities. He's now a Planeswalker, a child of Urza with the power of the Spark and that of the Legacy flowing through him. The vast multiverse is within his grasp, and Karn begins his sojourn across the planes. Shortly into his travels, Karn decides to create a world of his own, an artificial and mathematically perfect plane he names Argentum. From this world of metal, Karn sends out probes to observe other planes in the multiverse and to maintain vigil over his home of Dominaria. While he remains in Argentum, Karn is witness to the atrocities unfolding across the multiverse. Beings driven by ambition and greed, wars that leave countless dead, and whole planes succumbing to devastation. This stark reality sends the Silver Golem into a deep malaise. Meanwhile, one of his probes sent to Dominaria is flawed and becomes defective, transforming into the artifact known as the Mirari. The device is discovered on Otaria in roughly 4305 AR, by Chainer, a minion of the Cabal organization. It sparks a deadly grab for power amongst the continent's inhabitants, for the Mirari is an artifact of great power that can transform desires into reality. The Mirari drives the events of the Odyssey and Onslaught blocks, in which the nations and people of Otaria vie to control its power, while the artifact itself begins mutating the land around it. War breaks out between the Cabal, led by the warrior Jeska, who had been transformed to Phage, and the forces of Ixidor, led by the illusory angel Akroma. In the climax of battle, when Akroma and Phage came face to face and locked in a duel, Jeska's brother Kamal intervenes and kills both women and another named Zagorka. The essence of the three merge into one, and the being known as Corona the False God and Avatar of Dominaria is born. In her brief existence, Corona continues to destroy the war-torn continent of Otaria and drain the plane of its mana, all in attempts to understand her identity and her purpose. A plan is hatched by powerful beings known as the Numena to trap Corona and bind her to their will. Although they're successful, the timely intervention of Kamal saves Corona from imprisonment. She's instead banished to the Blind Eternities. Dazed and scared of the void between worlds, she travels paths to various planes, one of which is the metal world of Argentum. The false god is approached by Karn, disguised under the pseudonym of Lord Mocked. The discussion shakes the planeswalker from his depressive state, and he soon follows Corona back to Dominaria. The false god is consumed by madness and eventually defeated, leaving a reborn Jeska, whose planeswalker spark is ignited by the ordeal. Karn retrieves Jeska and the Mirari, takes both to Argentum, where he transforms the probe into a golem warden named Memnarch, and charges it with guardianship over the plane, before Karn and Jeska travel the multiverse together as teacher and pupil. But something terrible is happening that goes unnoticed by the Silver Golem. The Phyrexian Heartstone within Karn holds a small amount of the Phyrexian contagion known as glistening oil, and traces of it are left behind on Argentum and on every plane the two visit. Karn is unwittingly seeding countless worlds with the Phyrexian infection, a fact that will have dire consequences in the centuries to come. In truth, the oil had already begun taking hold of his plane of Argentum when the warden Memnarch comes into contact with it. The contagion corrupts the golem's mind, and the increasingly self-aware Memnarch takes ownership of Argentum, renaming the plane as Mirrodin. He sets out terraforming the plane, making it hospitable for non-artificial life, for which he has a dubious purpose. Memnarch intends to turn Mirrodin into a machine, a device capable of generating a being with a planeswalker spark, so that he may harvest it and transfer its powers to himself. Driven mad by the oil, and perhaps following the wishes of Phyrexia to once more conquer the planes, Memnarch spends nearly 100 years gathering creatures across the multiverse, using soul traps to steal them from other planes and populate Mirrodin with them. During this time, Karn attempts to return to Argentum, but surprisingly finds himself blocked. His warden placed a veil over the plane, preventing Karn from planeswalking to Mirrodin. Aware of the dire situation, Karn reaches the elf Glissa Sunseeker through dreams and visions, directing her and her companions, the goblin Slobad, the Lichhead Geth, and the golem Bosch, towards defeating Memnarch. Through much bloodshed and sacrifice, the group succeeds and Karn once more returns to Argentum. The Silver Golem is shocked by the transformation of his cold and perfect world into a twisted trap for thousands. Karn melts the deranged Memnarch down to his Mirari core and entrusts Glissa with its safekeeping, then returns much of Mirrodin's abducted creatures back to their home planes. But Karn makes a tragic oversight by not investigating deeper into the corruption of his warden and the presence of the mysterious mycosynth in Mirrodin's core, a substance that transforms flesh to metal and vice versa. Hidden from sight and nestled deep below the surface, the glistening oil remains on Mirrodin, unerringly fulfilling its purpose. For decades, the oil grows, spreading corruption and bending minds to the thought of Phyrexian completion. A new Phyrexia builds within the heart of Karn's own creation. 100 years after Memnarch's defeat, a crisis erupts on Dominaria that will have repercussions for the entire multiverse and the very nature of the Planeswalker spark. the damage dealt to the time streams by Urza's experiment, the Silex Blast, the Phyrexian invasion, and other events created rifts in the fabric of reality that threatened to tear the multiverse apart. Karn returns once more to his home plane and at Joyra's behest assists in closing the rifts across Dominaria, some of which he had a personal hand in creating. Karn employs the aid of the Artificer and Planeswalker Venser in closing the Tolarian Rift, and travels 300 years into the past to seal the rift during the Phyrexian invasion, when Master Mage Baron unleashes his spell of desperation and obliterated Tolaria. Like many of the other rifts, the godlike powers of planeswalkers weren't enough to seal them and mend the fabric of space-time. To prevent the destruction of the multiverse, many walkers sacrificed their sparks or their lives to bind the time rifts, and Karn is no exception. He releases the power of the spark, held within Urza's gemstone eyes, in a consuming spell that closes the rift. Karn's actions and those of other walkers are immortalized in the Great Mending, which heals the multiverse and alters the nature of the Planeswalker spark. A card with the same name showcases the silver golem in its art. For the first time in centuries, Karn is without his spark and loses the powers of a Planeswalker. More importantly, he is without the spark's protection, which staves off all illness and disease. Karn feels a tarnish, a corruption within his own heart that had up until this point been contained. The Phyrexian oil within Xancha's heartstone seeps into his being and begins the process of completion. All too familiar with the dangers of Phyrexia and the threat a single drop of glistening oil presents, Karn seeks to isolate himself from the rest of the multiverse. He speaks in cryptic warnings to Venser before harnessing the last remnants of his spark's power and hurtling himself across the blind eternities. Karn travels unpredictably so as not to be foolishly followed before landing upon the surface of Argentum. The plane had once already been transformed, and now both Mirrodin and its creator are in the midst of another, one that will ultimately lead to a new Phyrexia and a new Father of Machines. For decades, Karn languishes in his self-imposed exile, imprisoned within his own mind as he struggles against the Phyrexian contagion gripping his soul. The golem retreats deep into Mirrodin's core, where he is hailed as the Father of Machines by the swelling ranks of new Phyrexia sects. The praetors, or leaders of each sect, give their advice, whispering manipulations to further corrupt Karn's mind, so that he may fulfill the vision of Phyrexia. We can see Karn's struggle in the art and flavor text of cards such as Corrupted Conscience, which shows Karn on his new throne within Mirrodin's core, and reads, "Karn's creation is now his master." And in Praetor's Council, which highlights the green-aligned Praetor Vorinclex's manipulations, and states, as the Phyrexian contagion corroded Karn's body, the Praetors whispered psalms to corrupt his mind. The Phyrexian religion and their devotion to Karn as the new Father of Machines is further highlighted in the cycle of shrine cards, which each depict a bust or statue in Karn's likeness, an object of devotion for Phyrexia. The corruption isn't limited to Karn and isn't contained in Mirrodin's core. Soon, glistening oil, Phyrexian contagion engines, and armies of completed horrors burst forth from the depths of the plane and begin a ruthless crusade to cleanse Mirrodin of all life that doesn't conform to Phyrexian perfection. In 4557 AR, Koth, a Planeswalker and Mirrodin native, travels to Dominaria seeking allies against the corruption consuming his home. Here, he meets the walkers Elspeth Terrell, once a knight of Bant on Alara, and an individual with personal experience with Phyrexians, and Venser, the last person to see Karn alive. The trio come to witness a Mirrodin besieged from all sides and from within by a growing wave of new Phyrexia. Karn soon learns of their presence on the plane, and for a small window, the golem frees his mind from its corruption long enough to send an artificial guide to lead the trio to Phyrexia's core and his throne. The Planeswalkers have in their company Malira, an elfin healer immune to glistening oil with the power to heal those tainted by corruption. After a harrowing journey through hordes of Phyrexians in dangerous terrain, the party emerges in Mirrodin's core, where Karn rests atop his throne, a prisoner of his own creation. Melira uses her power to cure Karn's body of the Phyrexian contagion, but states that they are too late. His soul is tarnished beyond cleansing. She can do no more to save the Silver Golem. Just like his artificial plane, whose core has been consumed by Phyrexia, so too has Karn's heart succumbed. But the trio of walkers refuse to accept defeat, and an idea flashes in Venser's mind. The artificer had spent many years working in direct contact with or in proximity of countless power stones. Though they act as great power sources, the stones also emit a form of radiation. Individuals subjected to magical radiation over a long period of time develop an illness known as phthisis. Due to his handling of power stones, Venser had been afflicted with the disease and is already experiencing several symptoms. The artificer knows that his time is short and realizes what he must do. Venser draws upon his remaining stores of mana and casts a spell that transfers his own planeswalker spark to Karn. He sacrifices his own life to save that of his old companion. A brilliant flash of light surges across Karn's silver carapace and dispels the dark corruption desperately holding on to the golem's heart, as he once more ascends to the status of planeswalker. The immunity of his newly acquired spark frees Karn from Phyrexia, and he stands before the others as Karn liberated, showcased in the art of his card. The golem surveys the landscape of his once perfect artificial world and realizes the gravity of his failures. He and Urza had spent thousands of years battling Phyrexia, and yet it remains, mocking him. In the flavor text of Argent Mutation, Karn states that my world is corrupted beyond cleansing. I must prevent this from happening to others. With that resolution in mind, the Silver Golem planeswalks from New Phyrexia, leaving Mirrodin to its fate as he scours the multiverse in search of a way to destroy the looming threat. Karn, once more caught in a crusade against Phyrexia, returns to his home of Dominaria. Here, in the deep and sentient forests of Yavimaya, the Silver Golem searches for the Silex, a device used by Urza over 4,000 years ago that released a devastating blast that destroyed his brother Mishra, the Phyrexian army Mishra led, and plummeted the plane into an ice age. Karn hopes once more to unleash the device's powers on New Phyrexia. His mission is sidetracked when word reaches him of the Elder Dragon Nicol Bolas's imminent invasion of Ravnica, an attempt to regain the power of pre-mending Planeswalker. Although Karn agrees to assist the Gatewatch in their fight against Bolas, he refuses to take the oath. He knows his war with Phyrexia will consume him and would be unable to remain true to his vows. Karn travels with the Gatewatch to Ravnica during the War of the Spark, where they are trapped by the activation of the Immortal Sun. He uses his touch to instantly understand Ral Zarek's spark-detecting goggles and creates a spell granting the ability to other Planeswalkers, making it easier to coordinate their efforts against Bolas and his Dread Horde army. Karn and a group of other walkers are tasked with traveling through Bolas's portal to Amonkhet, where they deactivate the planar bridge housed within the metallic body of Artificer and Pawn of Bolas, Tezzeret. The group is successful, and after the sabotaged bridge collapses, Hazaret, the last remaining god of Amonkhet, entrusts Karn with her spear. The Silver Golem brings it back to Ravnica and urges Niv Mizzet Reborn to use it against Bolas. Mizzet drives the spear into the Elder Dragon's chest, and in combination with Liliana Vess, who turns the zombified God Eternals against Bolas, defeats the dragon, ending the War of the Spark. In the aftermath of the war, Karn is poised to resume his battle with Phyrexia. He attempts to leave for a scouting mission of New Phyrexia, but is dissuaded by Ajani Goldmane and Teferi. The other Planeswalkers understand Karn's concerns, but argue against haste. Instead, the three deliberate on a plan of attack and discuss how best to counter Phyrexia's advances. Karn, the Silver Golem whose lowly purpose was to merely act as a probe for the time travel experiments of Urza Planeswalker, has survived his magnificent creator and seen himself elevated to the status of Planeswalker. A unique amalgamation of Phyrexian and Dominarian, of man and machine, of emotion and calculation, Karn's developed into a complex character with an integral role throughout the MTG story. But his story isn't over. His mortal enemy, the race he was created to help destroy, remains a looming threat to the multiverse as a new Phyrexia is on the rise. It consumed his plane of Argentum and nearly consumed him, and Karn will stop at nothing to eradicate the Phyrexian contagion once and for all. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this video on Karn's Silver Golem. Now I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on Karn, what his future will hold with his fight against Phyrexia, as well as suggestions for other characters you'd like to see discussed in future videos. And if you're a fan of lore and storytelling, consider subscribing to the channel or checking out the podcast, where content is uploaded frequently. Again, a huge shout out to all of my Patreon supporters who make all of this possible. I couldn't do it without their spectacular patronage. If you're interested in becoming a lore luminary for access to me, a great community, and early video drops, check out the link below or head to patreon.com/thelorebrarians to learn more. Special thanks to script editor Kenan Orhan and Alex Joaquim for the intro and outro music. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.